Tonight on America in Black.
Sometimes I stare at the wall and in the back of my mind I hear my conscience call.
It is the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, and LL Cool J has been rocking the mic for almost 40 years.
Well, I've been rapping since I was 9 years old.
Now LL is using his legacy to honor rap's pioneers.
When I look at all of these groups, I say, yo, I want to lift them up. I want to celebrate them.
Entertainment Tonight's Nichelle Turner sits down with the actor and rapper, Mr. Ladies Love Cool James. Arguably one of the greatest of all time, the GOAT.
I introduced it to the lexicon,
yes, you
right?
did. Mm-hmm. Are you the GOAT?
And
we have lost a lot of generational wealth because we had eminent domain.
the National Project trying to help African American families reclaim the land taken from their ancestors.
I got about 200 emails from folks across the country asking me to help them get their land back.
Including the relatives of a Raisin in the Sun writer, Lorraine Hansberry.
We have earned it through slavery, everything that we have.
But not everyone agrees.
There's not one person, not one Black American in America today that's deserving of reparations.
How optimistic are you that reparations can even be real?
I'm never going to give up hope.
Ed Gordon explores the fight to recover stolen land. Plus,
The Shade Room is probably the most powerful platform on social media.
I knew from day 3 when it had 3,500 followers. I said, this is gonna be big.
in a BET exclusive, Angelica Nwandu spills the tea on how she started the social media juggernaut, The Shade Room, and the challenges that have come with multi-million-dollar success.
I mean, nobody says, TMZ, how are you impacting the white community? Like,
Angie gives Jerika Duncan all tea, no shade on the future of The Shade Room.
Is it possible that the Shade Room no longer exists in the near future?
And later, Roy Wood Jr. drops the mic on how America has paid restitution or reparations to everybody but Black folks. All this and more tonight on America in Black.
Welcome to America in Black. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Entertainment Tonight's Nichelle Turner. Now, as you may know, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the birth of hip-hop. And in terms of chart-topping impact and longevity, few can match the resume of the man from Queens, New York, LL Cool J. So to mark this milestone in hip-hop history, I recently sat down with LL to discuss his legendary career, his push to honor hip-hop's old school, and what's next for the rapper who very well might be the greatest of all time. Yeah, I said it. In 1986, a young LL Cool J rocked the Soul Train stage. 3 decades later, he was front and center once again, leading an iconic Grammy Awards performance featuring some of hip-hop's greatest legends. For LL, this was a full-circle moment. Hip-hop birthed LL Cool J, and now he is using his platform to protect its legacy.
I think it all worked out well. You know what I'm saying? I'm very thankful. I'm doing the things that are in my heart to do. You know, I'm doing the things that I dreamt of doing.
I represent Queens, she was raised out in Brooklyn.
The man known to the world as LL Cool J was born James Todd Smith. He grew up in Queens in a home touched by violence. At the age of 4, he witnessed his father shoot his mother and grandfather, almost killing them. What did those experiences, what did they do to shape you?
Certain things happen at a really young age, like 4 years old, but so aggressive and traumatic that you remember it vividly.
Yeah. LL would later reconcile with his father, but what he experienced left a lasting impression.
It kind of awakens your mind in a different way and kind of, you know, on some levels it makes you almost fearless.
Yeah. LL would carry that fearlessness throughout his career, his bold charisma captured on the cover of magazines.
Well, I've been rapping since I was 9 years old. And when I was 11, my grandfather bought me $2,000 worth of stereo equipment.
There was no slick, clever, strategic, you know, it was, you know what, I'm following my gut, my instincts.
I went to a record store and I got all the rap records. And I took the addresses off the rap records and sent a tape to every record company. And finally, Rick Rubin called me back. Here I am.
His first single, I Need a Beat, was produced by Rick Rubin and released in 1984 while LL was still in 9th grade. It sold over 100,000 copies. In those days, though, did you think at that time, like, this is what my life's work is gonna be? Or did you think hip-hop is just here for a minute?
I was following the light.
In 1985, LL went on to record his first album, Radio, which went platinum.
I'm the pinnacle, that means I reign supreme, and I'm notorious, I'll crush you like a jelly bean. I'm bad.
You came out on top.
Right.
You were topping the charts, all of that, and you were a 16-year-old kid. Was there pressure for you, number one, to then remain relevant?
No, because it wasn't manufactured.
Okay.
I wasn't manufactured, so there's no pressure when you're doing what you love.
Sometimes I stare at the wall, and in the back of my mind, I hear my conscience call, telling me I need a girl who's as sweet as a dove. For the first time in my life, I see I need love.
LL went on to release hit records from the 80s
Back to Cali, styling, profiling.
through the 90s and into the 2000s. In 20 years, LL released 7 platinum and 5 gold albums with nearly 14 million albums sold. And while his music career was skyrocketing, LL made the risky move into a different lane.
Are you taking my duplication investigation seriously?
What you come to realize is, you know, look, a cunning hare has more than one burrow. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just didn't want to be controlled. So basically, I freed myself up, not limiting myself.
LL jumped on screen, landing roles in TV and film, including the sitcom In the House in 1995.
I think he hit an artery.
Was there ever a thought, because we know LL Cool J is hard as hell, and then you go and do a sitcom like In the House. Did you ever think, what does this do to my street cred, or will they look at me any differently?
So when I was coming up, a lot of the guys I grew up with were hustlers. Some of the most feared guys in the world were the most lovable and the most affable and smiling and giggling and laughing and doing silly stuff. So basically what I'm telling you is street credibility does not come from having a tough guy persona.
He went from series regular to 5-time Grammy host and Hollywood leading man, starred in over 20 films.
What you think? I think you know the answer to that, clown.
He spent the last 14 years starring as ex-Navy SEAL Sam Hanna on the CBS series NCIS LA.
If I'm willing to forgive you, others will too. Huh?
Will you ever get rid of Sam? He's been with you for 14 years.
Well, no, Sam is cemented in history. I mean, it's the number 14 longest running show in the history of television.
Yeah. It may seem that LL's music career took a backseat, but he never left hip-hop. He created the global platform company Rock the Bells to celebrate and elevate timeless hip-hop with content, including Sirius XM's streaming music channel and hip-hop experiences. I know that one of the big reasons you wanted to expand this as a company and pay homage to those folks who came before you in the game of hip-hop and make sure that their legacies were cemented.
You know, the people who started this hip-hop industry, look, when you look at rock and roll, when you look at jazz, when you look at blues, other genres, the people who started it aren't always the ones who get the recognition and the ones who get the love and get celebrated.
Yeah.
So when I look at Flash and the Treacherous 3, and I look at the Fearless 4, and I look at the Crash Crew, and I look at Cold Crush, Grandmaster Caz, JDL, Almighty KG, when I look at them, I say, yo, I want to lift them up. I want to celebrate them. But at the same time, I want to bridge the generations. I don't want to exclude the young generation and the new generation at all. That's like why when we did the Grammys, we had everyone from Flash and Melly Mel to Glorilla and Lil Baby. And everybody in between. Because hip-hop is a family and it needs to be cultural continuity. We're lifting up the culture.
That's true. Through his illustrious career, LL credits his wife Simone of nearly 30 years and 4 kids for keeping him grounded. We know you as LL. When you go home, Are you Todd?
They call me Todd.
Dad?
Dad. You know, I mean, one of my daughters calls me Faj, which is hello, Faj.
I love it. You know, one thing you do like to keep close to the vest is your personal life, but we know you're married dad of 4.
Yeah.
You know, what's the secret, though, to that happy, healthy, long-term relationship and just, I don't know, other life that just, does it balance you?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that is important, and this goes for my family and for everybody around me. I'm just a big believer in helping people make their dreams come true.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I try to help facilitate people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm very much into, I love that. Because I know what that feels like when somebody did that for me.
Yeah.
So that matters.
LL Cool J has constructed a legacy of undeniable greatness, a master of his crafts, a Kennedy Center's honoree, arguably the greatest of all time. You titled one of your albums, The GOAT.
Well, I introduced it to the lexicon,
Yes, you
right?
did. Mm-hmm.
That, which I didn't know it was gonna become what it became, like, wow, who knew, right? GOAT, like, I had no idea.
Are you the GOAT?
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the reality, though, let me just say this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in reality, you can't compare art to anybody because art speaks to people based on where they're at in their lives.
That is true.
We add the competitive element to the game.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are other people who are great. I'm well aware that there are other people who have even more accolades and people love them and all. I'm very clear. But yes, I did bring that to the table because, you know, I believe in myself.
Of course.
You know? Yeah.
What does the future hold for LL Cool J?
What does the future hold? A new record and all the things around that.
A tour.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on the road as well.
Yeah. If you could go back in time, finally, and tell James Todd Smith, that 16-year-old kid, what the future would hold, what things would look like now, what would you tell him?
You gotta know your value. A lot of times, you know, people, you know, we get nervous, we get, you know, you don't realize it, but you gotta know your value.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know your value and you also wanna see the people on the other side of the table win, and you're willing to work with people, what's the problem? Cooperation go a lot further than competition.
Yes, it does.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it does.
Coming up next, Black land was taken. Now a growing movement fights to reclaim what is owed. Ed Gordon reports.
We have earned through slavery. We have earned everything that we have.
And it's one of the most popular and polarizing social media sites. Jerika Duncan talks exclusively with the woman behind The Shade Room.
Is it possible that the Shade Room no longer exists in the near future?
Absolutely.
When America in Black continues in a moment.
Welcome back to America in Black. I'm Special Correspondent Ed Gordon. The word reparations brings about many emotions, from fervent support to hard opposition and everything in between. But for some Black Americans, reparations means the return of lost land, land on which their ancestors toiled, land that was stolen, and land they were simply denied. Today, there is a nationwide push to get some of that land back. And in this fight, a new generation of activists are emerging, vowing to right historical wrongs.
Maybe I'll get down on my black knees. All right, Mr. Charlie. All right, Mr. Great White Father. You just give us that money, and we won't come out there and dirty up your white folks' neighborhood. And I'll feel fine.
It was in this city, in fact, in this neighborhood, that one of America's most iconic plays took root.
A Raisin in the Sun depicts an embattled Black family fighting to choose where to live in Chicago. It was a battle the writer's own family waged after suffering years of racial harassment and fear of death. In 1960, Lorraine Hansberry's successful landowning family had to flee the city. Lorraine's sister, Mamie, who just turned 100 years old, remembers the terrifying departure.
We had a wonderful life, but I knew it was over. I knew it's a harsh thing to say, but they were gonna kill me.
Mamie and Lorraine's father was a businessman and a landlord. In the 1930s, he looked to buy property in the Woodlawn neighborhood, but residents there had an agreement. No part of the land should be sold, leased to, or permitted to be occupied by any person of the colored race. He took the case to the Supreme Court and won. At one point, Carl Hansberry owned up to 13 properties in the city. Many he would turn into safe havens for Black Americans fleeing appalling conditions in the South.
When you think about that property and you think about the linkage between what spawned that story and where you sit today, what do you think?
I think a lot about my grandmother and her siblings and Lorraine and my great-grandfather at that time and what it must have been like. You know, it was both great and bad for them because, you know, my grandfather made a great life for his family.
In the 1950s and 60s, the city of Chicago seized Carl Hansberry's properties, claiming eminent domain, and auctioned them off to white buyers. Now Tay Hansberry, Mamie's granddaughter and Carl's great-granddaughter, is fighting to get some sort of compensation.
It really came about when I was looking to get a piece of property in Chicago a few years back, and I had a conversation with a lawyer who kind of mentioned that once properties are auctioned off, the money that's gotten from that auction is supposed to go back to the original owner. It just lit a light bulb in my head. I was like, wait a second, I don't think that happened with our family.
The Hansberry story, while unique, is not extraordinary. There are a number of Black families who are seeking reparations for land unjustly taken.
Just let them know that we're going to be posting it.
That's where Kavon Ward comes in. She is helping the Hansberries and hundreds of other families to get compensation for stolen properties. An activist and a former lobbyist, she is the founder of the nonprofit Where Is My Land?
There are a lot of people who won't necessarily see land return as reparations. How do you see this?
I would say that land return is a form of restitution. And I think the reason why so many people are so hesitant to say that land return is reparations, because in so many cases, they don't feel like Black people who are descendants of slaves should only get this one big pot of money that's surrounded around reparations.
In 2020, while living in Manhattan Beach, Kavon heard about its history. Stolen from the Bruce family in 1924, their descendants were now trying to get it back. She knew she had to help, so she got the word out.
So many people became familiar with this through Bruce's Beach and what happened.
I wanted the group that I was working with to focus on shedding light on what had happened to these co-founders of this very white city.
The beachfront property, purchased by Charles and Willa Bruce in 1912, was turned into a popular seaside resort, which attracted many Black beachgoers. 12 years later, the city of Manhattan Beach took the land under eminent domain. Kavon connected with one of the Bruce family's relatives in California.
I said, I think you guys should get your land back, and I want to help.
The law was used to steal this property 100 years ago, and the law today will give it back.
In 2022, Los Angeles County returned the property to the Bruce's great-grandchildren. They have since sold it back to the county for $20 million, finding it too difficult to develop in a profitable way. But the initial return of Bruce's Beach marked the beginning of Kavon's crusade.
Once Governor Newsom signed the bill that would allow for the transfer to happen to the Bruces, I got about 200 emails from folks across the country asking me to help them get their land back.
We're here today to show what reparations look like.
State Senator Stephen Bradford was involved in the fight to get Bruce's Beach back to the family. He is also a member of California's Reparations Task Force.
I see reparations as that which was promised and is still owed to descendants of chattel slavery, but I use Bruce's Beach as an example. If we can return this property to this family, we can find ways within the state and in this nation to provide some level of reparations to descendants of slavery here in California and this nation.
California is the only place with a statewide initiative to address reparations. Elsewhere, efforts are local. The San Francisco Reparations Committee recently proposed giving $5 million to individual black residents with claims to be paid out over time. But where does the national effort stand? I asked Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee about H.R. 40, introduced to Congress more than 30 years ago. The resolution calls for a commission to address reparations for African Americans.
How optimistic are you that reparations can even be real anytime soon?
I'm never going to give up hope. John Conyers filed this legislation in 1989 with a lot of momentum. The momentum was the 1988 American Civil Liberties Act that gave reparations to Japanese Americans, rightly so. And it was signed by a Republican president. It seems right, it seems righteous. The H.R. 40 should pass.
Do you see land return, that kind of redress, as a reparation?
It may be land, it may be establishing HBCUs as having no threat of closing their doors, historically black colleges. It may be a whole new health scheme, if you will, that deals with the stark disparities of African Americans in health care.
I just sent you the TND from this morning, the Post.
However, not everyone sees reparations as a cure.
Reparations is a pipe dream. It's not even realistic.
Armstrong Williams is a conservative political commentator, entrepreneur, and talk show host who's been a skeptic of reparations for years.
It would bankrupt the government. There's not one person, not one black American in America today that's deserving of reparations. Not one. It happened centuries ago.
A recent poll from the Pew Center shows national support sticks closely along racial lines. 77% of black Americans favor reparations versus 18% of white Americans. But when it comes to the return of land, the success of Bruce's Beach may have opened the floodgates.
Now we have about 700 people waiting in queue, and these are families from all across the country. They're in Connecticut, they're in Texas, they're in South Carolina, they're in Georgia, they're in Arkansas. There's a lot in California, they're in Illinois.
And those claims could lead to real money. Chicago realtor Crystal Corley walked me around the Woodlawn neighborhood, home to many of Hansberry's properties.
Houses are going for $500,000 over here today. Condos are going anywhere from $250,000. If it's new construction, it's going for $300,000 or north of that. Right here, they had 2 properties, which are now all townhomes. That would be $600,000 times 2. That's $1.2 million right there. We have lost a lot of generational wealth because we had eminent domain, predatory lending. If you miss one payment, they took the whole house away.
As the next generation of Hansberrys takes on the fight for compensation, it is clear it won't be easy.
Tay Hansberry reached out to us maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, asking us for her, for help. My understanding is that she had tried to get copies of deeds for a long time, and she had no success.
Kavon has been amazing. I'm just so grateful for her and her organization that they exist, because this is not something you can do alone.
What do you want the outcome to be? What are you looking for out of this?
Some type of restitution, some type of apology, and not in just the form of, we're so sorry this happened to you. I'm not looking to take anything, but there are other ways to right the wrong.
As Miss Mamie watches her granddaughter try to right the wrongs done to her family so many years ago, she still hopes for justice.
We have earned it through slavery long time ago. We have earned everything that we have.
Coming up next, an exclusive chat with the founder of perhaps the most popular and polarizing social media site, The Shade Room.
Running a media company, especially as a black woman in the space that I'm in, is very hard. Because I'm not expected to just be a media company. I'm expected to be an activist. I mean, nobody says, TMZ, how are you impacting the white community? Nobody says that.
Plus, Roy Wood Jr. drops the mic on reparations.
Some are gonna do the right thing, and some of us are gonna buy a helicopter. That's just what it is.
When America in Black continues in a moment.
Welcome back to America in Black. I'm CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan. Nearly a decade ago, Angie Wandu started an Instagram page called The Shade Room,
What began as a social media account focused on Black celebrity gossip has turned into something much more, a place where people can also find news, inspiration, and community. Today, the social media phenomenon has nearly 28 million followers and a multi-million-dollar valuation. I sat down for an exclusive interview with Wandu, who discussed how controversy and criticism surrounding the Shade Room has led her to think about possibly shutting it down.
Hey roommates, Barack Obama here. Yes, coming to you from the Shade Room.
Whether it's presidents of the United States,
Joe Biden, he stepped into the Shade Room,
or celebrity gossip.
Definitely a cup of shade, my dear.
For the last 9 years, the Shade Room has been one of the most influential.
Hey, what's up? It's Lauren London, and you're stepping into the Shade Room.
And yes, controversial sites on Instagram, feeding the gram with a daily dose of breakup rumors, attention-grabbing viral videos, and thousands of comments by the minute. To date, the platform has amassed more followers than its top 4 competitors combined.
In the dark room.
No.
He said the dark room.
It's the Shade Room.
And the person behind it all is Shade Room founder Angie Wandu. You're 32 years old.
Yeah.
Your company's valuation is reportedly $86 million. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Did you see this for yourself?
Absolutely not. This was supposed to be a side hustle.
Her success was born out of adversity. Her parents, originally from Nigeria, moved to the States before she was born. At the age of 6, she lost her mother to domestic violence at the hands of her father, forcing Wandu and her 4 siblings into foster care.
There was a lot of sexual, physical, mental abuse that took place in foster care, but there were also a lot of good things that happened.
It was during that time she fell in love with writing.
You squeeze your eyes tight enough, you can almost see the sun.
In 2014, she poured her personal story into a film she co-wrote called Night Comes On. But despite making it into the Sundance Film Festival, she struggled as a screenwriter to pay her bills. Her best friend encouraged Wandu to pursue her second love, following celebrity gossip.
I would literally just update them on everything, and they would be like, oh, this is hilarious.
In March of 2014, she created the Shade Room on Instagram, posting celebrity news.
I knew from day 3 when it had 3,500 followers. I remember I called my friend and I said, this is gonna be big.
As the Shade Room began to take off, Wandu operated in the shadows, living in a small apartment in South Los Angeles. She ran the page by herself, a staff of 1 for nearly a year. You stayed in a building that had roaches longer than you say you needed to. Why?
Because I was afraid that everything that I had would crumble.
That fear of failure is what drove her to focus on content her followers reacted to. At the time, it was Black celebrities and scandal. And she quickly realized she could mobilize her followers, who she affectionately calls roommates, to send in tips and break stories.
I remember in the beginning of the platform, I would kind of mobilize them like an army. So if I wanted an exclusive from a celebrity, I would say, hey, go to this person's page and comment until they step in and comment about this story. And so they would do that, and the people would step in and say, what is the Shade Room?
What was your first viral post?
See, in the beginning, we started off real salacious. I think it was T.I. cheating on Tiny on Mother's Day in a house full of, like, these young girls.
T.I. denied the allegations, and the post was later removed. Was there ever a moment, even back then, that you cringed and thought, ooh, I don't know if I should post this?
I'm gonna be honest with you, no. I was 23, I was just out of college, I was messy myself. I just was in a different mind space. To me, I didn't see anything wrong with it. The people loved it.
Do you have a post that you regret, that you go, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have done that?
Well, let's start with the ones where I got sued over. Let's start there.
In 2017, comedian Michael Blackson sued Wandu for posting a video of him having sex with a woman who was not his girlfriend.
I was very immature. I don't really care. If they cheating, to me, it's fair game. But, he was cheating and he was in a hotel. And at first it was just a normal post, but then he denied it. So I couldn't have that. So we ended up posting the full video, and it was a violation for sure. I was young and I didn't really understand the impact of the Shade Room. I took the lawsuit, on the chin. I said, oh, I deserve it.
But over the years, as the number of followers has grown, the Shade Room's reach has expanded beyond entertainment and all the way to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Erica Lowe is the White House Director of African American Media. She says speaking directly to Black Americans via the Shade Room is an essential part of her team's communication strategy.
They are often the generators of conversations that go viral on social media, and oftentimes that land in the traditional media landscape.
The Shade Room is the Black version of TMZ. It is probably the most powerful platform on social media.
Publicist Sean Zanotti represents many celebrities, including Wendy Williams.
Before the Shade Room, it was traditional media. Traditional media was when someone would come to me, that's where they wanted to be.
And they wanted an interview for television.
Absolutely.
But now?
But now, how do I get on the Shade Room? Or, I was on the Shade Room, this horrible story happened, how can you fix the pieces?
The roommates want to know, how come you don't mess with the Shade Room, girl?
I love the Shade Room from a distance, and I really feel like as hard as I work, they only post really the negative stuff.
Shade Room, I hate y'all. Hey, clip this.
I told y'all the first time. I said,
clip this right here.
Let them block.
I hate y'all. I never want y'all to post nothing of me, nothing I say, positive or negative.
It's been criticized by many A-list celebrities for posting personal parts of their lives and for sharing some of the poorest representations of Black culture. This post is not that old. Father opens up about having 7 children by 7 different women.
Yes.
It had over 130,000 comments.
It did? Well, because it was very controversial.
That controversy she calls necessary is what keeps her up at night, constantly at odds with what to post and what to ignore.
There's no filter for the Shade Room. And so I always say, well, if the culture looks at itself through the lens of a filter, through me filtering just the positivity that comes out of the culture and not talking about the real, the bad, the good, the ugly, how will we be able to see ourselves? So a lot of times when people say, oh, I hate the Shade Room, it's really they hate certain aspects of the culture that we're reflecting back to them. Running a media company, especially as a Black woman in the space that I'm in, is very hard because I'm not expected to just be a media company. I'm expected to be an activist. I'm expected to hold the betterment of the community. Serving the Black community, they have a higher standard for their media companies, than typical. I mean, nobody says, TMZ, how are you impacting the white community? Nobody says that.
Is it possible that the Shade Room no longer exists in the near future or evolves into something totally different?
Absolutely.
You've thought about shutting down the Shade Room?
A lot of times. I see the importance of the Shade Room and what it's doing in media, but then I also sometimes struggle with my faith. I know it's polarizing. And so for me, it's like a battle. But I have 33 employees. I have 35 million people across all platforms that rely on the Shade Room for news. If I'm going to shut it down, I have to feel very convicted. You know what I mean? I have to feel a strong conviction that that is what I'm supposed to do.
At 32 years old, Wandu says her own evolution has impacted the Shade Room, where you can also find celebrations of joy and reminders of what's possible with hard work. What are you most proud of about the Shade Room?
I got a lot of things that I'm proud of about the Shade Room. One, the philanthropy. You know, we don't talk about it because we don't do it to talk about it. But we have, you know, scholarships, endowments at 3 schools for African American students. We've given to foster youth. You know, I have a real big passion for that because that's where I come from, transitional housing.
Wandu started with little, and even though she now lives in a 6-bedroom mansion in the hills of Los Angeles, she yearns for something more.
I've experienced the homes and the money. I have it. I know that it does not feed my soul. It doesn't. It's empty.
What does feed your soul?
Joy. And where I feel like I get joy from is the faith and the integrity of God and His plan for my life.
To finish this sentence as we wrap up.
Yeah.
The influence the Shade Room has had on Black culture is?
Up for interpretation.
Coming up next, Roy Wood Jr. drops the mic on reparations.
When money is supposed to go to people in need, there's gonna be scammers and people wasting the cash. That's part of the game. And that's not a Black thing or a white thing. That's an American thing.
When America in Black continues in a moment.
Hey, I'm Roy Wood Jr. And for this month's mic drop, I'd like to talk about something light. Slavery! April marks the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which means for a day or two in April, we'll get to listen to politicians talk about how important it is to keep the dream alive, while also passing no policies to keep the dream alive. But a few groups in California are making a real push for one of Dr. King's dreams, reparations. In San Francisco, the Reparations Task Force conducted a 500-page study which lays out the generational harms caused by enslavement and other forms of discrimination. Their want is reparations for the descendants of American enslaved people. Now, they've yet to put a dollar amount to how much each Black person in San Francisco should get, but another group has. The African American Reparations Advisory Committee says the number for every Black person, $5 million. Now, there's arguments against reparations. Oh, it's my tax dollars. California wasn't a slave state, but at minimum, California was an accessory to the crime. And then there's the people who think Black folks are just gonna take their reparations money and put a swimming pool in the back of a Cadillac. And you know what? You're right. Some Black people will. But if the COVID stimulus check fiasco showed us anything, it's that when the government gives people a handout, some are gonna do the right thing, and some of us are gonna buy a helicopter. That's just what it is. But don't put that behavior off on Black people alone, because it ain't just us. During COVID, major corporations got almost $2 billion in relief funds that was supposed to go to their employees. But did the employees ever get the money? No. The corporations fired them and then pocketed the cash. And don't get me started on them PPP loan scams. We all know somebody that was running them scams. I'm talking to you, Cousin Johnny. Now, if it's one thing that we can all agree on about this country, is when money is supposed to go to people in need, there's gonna be scammers and people wasting the cash. That's part of the game. And that's not a Black thing or a white thing. That's an American thing. Some Black opponents of reparations have a different reasoning. The San Francisco area NAACP wants the money to go into programs that could fix many systemic issues. Now, money is a big part of change, but can these programs buy back the trust of the Black communities they've failed so far? And will they even do the right thing with the money once they have it? It's kind of easy to understand why some Black folks would just rather have the money in their hand. So when it comes to reparations, know that some of the people will take the money and do the wrong thing. But I guarantee you, there are plenty of Black people who will take that money and do something generational. We just might be creating the next wave of Black billionaires that show up at colleges and pay for everybody's tuition. And then the graduates will go celebrate in a swimming pool in the backseat of their Cadillac. I'm headed to San Francisco. I gotta change my address and tell everybody I'm from Fillmore. I gotta get this money. Peace. E40, what's up, baby?
Next month on America in Black, superstar actress Taraji P. Henson sits down with Ed Gordon to talk about her career and advocacy in support of Black mental health. The actress has been outspoken about her own struggles to find happiness.
You don't know what I cry about at night. That's why you have to show grace. But I'm a fighter, and I'm gonna fight for myself, and I'm gonna have that happiness again.
And we'll also explore the causes behind the rising suicide rates amongst Black youth in America.
I just know that this suicide rate is rising. The ages of the children that are committing suicide are getting younger and younger.
All of that and more on the next episode of America in Black.